going on right now. And we're in the middle of this process the Democratic Party is blatantly trying to stop and interfere with, as you see right now. We're way past the day where party leaders can determine an outcome here, but I think there's a vibrant conversation about whether there is anything that can be done. A Connecticut Congressman Jim Himes and superdelegates said, who believe the nominee should have a majority of delegates. And again, 93 people the New York Times talked to, 70-something said that they would be willing to vote against Bernie Sanders. And there's an interesting exchange Elizabeth Warren had on Twitter. It's making the rounds about this. This is her exchange with this pro-Bernie guy. And it's talking about she said she's ready for a convention floor battle. There's very, very interesting stuff from the supposed progressive, the supposedly progressive best friend of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. She's ready for a convention floor battle if things get iffy, and trust me, the Bernie Bros will be ready for it just as well.
Candidate on the stage, except for Bernie. Hello, somebody. Indicated that the candidate with the plurality of delegates should not necessarily be the nominee. This essentially means the will of the voters could be denied by the superdelegates and the DNC, which is basically...
Sorry, this is a question that,
and in my opinion,
was posed to Elizabeth Warren at a town hall a few days after the debate. I believe it was last night, by this account manager for a software company, Jason Pietramala. And he's a Bernie Sanders supporter. Let's just rewind a little bit so you get the full question there.
This essentially means the will of the voters could be denied by the superdelegates and the DNC, which is basically undemocratic. And in my opinion, is a bunch of baba booey, to put it politely. Can you explain why the will of the voters should not matter if no candidate reaches a majority of delegates?
So you do know that was Bernie's position in 2016.
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah.
He won 22 states, so he went to the convention
that was
for his
Bernie's
voters.
position in 2016, that it should not go to the person who had a plurality.
I mean, I don't think so. Again, he was definitely trying to play for the superdelegates, but trust me, I don't think you can say with a straight face, especially if you're Elizabeth Warren, that Bernie Sanders was a big fan and supporter of the superdelegates in the process. That's slightly disingenuous for Elizabeth Warren. But believe me, it's about to get a whole lot more disingenuous.
So, and remember, his last play was to superdelegates. So the way I see this,
because he was desperately trying to win the nomination
before you know where everybody stands, and then you stick with those rules. So for me, so the way I see this is you write the rules before you know where everybody stands, and then you stick with those rules. So for me, Bernie had a big hand in writing these rules. I didn't write them, but Bernie did.
Yeah, well, that's like saying that he set up the system right now. That's a complete and utter lie. If he had it his way, and there was a Democratic, pretty much for those of you who don't know, who people who aren't crazy probably wouldn't know, there's a Democratic Reform or Democratic Unity Commission that was set up in the week of 2016 with some Bernie supporters, some Hillary supporters. Yeah, so there was a bunch of Bernie Sanders supporters, a bunch of Hillary Clinton supporters. They all got in the room and tried to make these rules about how it would go for the next time. There were some caucuses that were included. You've heard a little bit about that. More debates, I think, was a big sticking point that came out of it. But the big thing was superdelegates, which really actually pissed off the Bernie Sanders campaign last time, because what she's saying there is he made a play to superdelegates. He had to. That was his only thing that he could possibly do to try to win the nomination when things got down to the wire at the end of last time. But believe me, he was no big fan of superdelegates. You don't want to know why? Because they all hated him, and they still hate him now, because superdelegates, for those of you who don't know, are pretty much the party elite who, in the wake of the 1968 Democratic laws, have been given a major voice in the Democratic primary and Democratic nominating process. And what they did, though, what Bernie Sanders' campaign did, and the people on the Unity Commission, like Nomiki Konst, if you're familiar with her, she's a definitely a great follow on Twitter. I think she has her own show now. I don't even know. But she and a bunch of other people, pretty much, I believe Nina Turner was actually on that as well. they're like, okay, we want the superdelegates to be gone. No superdelegates. No, it's just the people have a voice in the nominating process. And the Hillary Clinton, DNC type people are just like, no, we got to have superdelegates. It's like, we need to have some outsized influence and control. We need to be able to put our thumb on the scale. That's pretty much what they were saying. So they fought over superdelegates, and they eventually came to the conclusion that if there's no majority reached on the first ballot of the convention, then the superdelegates come into play. So that is the context that you need to know here, and that's probably why you're going to be able to, I think it'll help you better understand as you listen to this next part of this clip why this is so disingenuous.
And they were putting together the 2016 platform for the Democratic Convention.
Like, she says, oh yeah, they were putting it together, but what she does not understand here, it was a very tense, contentious negotiation with groups of people in the party that really did not like each other. And this is not Bernie Sanders' ideal scenario. This is work of a compromise between people who support Bernie Sanders and people who supported the more establishment wing of the Democratic Party. Like, that is what this is. Like, that's what these rules are.
Those are the rules that he wanted to write and others wanted to write. Everybody got in the race thinking that was the set of rules. I don't see how come you get to change it just because he now thinks there's an advantage to him for doing that.
I got to follow that, but I got the Howard reference at Hey Now, by the way, Jason. So listen, Senator Warren, to be clear, would you continue your fight for the Democratic nomination even if another candidate arrived at the convention ahead of you in the delegate count?
Yes.
You would continue. Why?
Because a lot of people made $5 contributions to my campaign to keep me in it. In fact, after that last Democratic debate, 250,000 people came to ElizabethWarren.com and said, we want you in this race. We raised $9 million in 3 days from just folks who said, I'll pitch in $5 or $25. They are the heart and soul of this race. I made the decision when I got in. I was not going to spend 70%
or is
of
it
my
your new
time
super PAC?
Raising money from billionaires and corporate executives and lobbyists. I was going to spend 100% of my time with folks. And I make my phone calls, as other candidates do. And the phone calls I make are to people who've pitched in $5 or $25. And as long as they want me to stay in this race, I'm staying in this race. And I've done a lot of pinky promises out there, so I got to stay in this. I've told little girls, we persist.
Yeah, so that is the Elizabeth Warren justification for pretty much staying in the race. And what she's saying is, wink, wink, wink to the superdelegates, I'll be around if you want me. Even though I'm probably going to, it's a distinct possibility at this point, I'm going to end up losing my home state to Bernie Sanders. Yeah, that is bench, that seems to be about what is going on here. And it's quite insane, because it's like, how in the world are you going to, how do you expect to get a, like, this is going to be, if Bernie Sanders gets the most votes by a good percentage, but maybe not the majority, if he gets a plurality, for example, he needs to get the nomination in order for there to continue to be a Democratic Party. That's all I'm going to say about that. So from California to the Carolinas, from North Dakota to Ohio, party leaders say they worry about Sanders, a Democratic socialist with a passionate but limited support so far. Okay. It keeps getting bigger, buddy. Keeps getting bigger, New York Times. I'll tell you that. Like, the coalition continues to expand, and I get the sense that the New York Times is going to keep calling it limited all the way to Milwaukee. But, Sanders and his advisors insist the opposite is true, that his ideas will generate huge excitements among young and working-class voters and lead to record turnout. Such hopes have yet to be borne out in nominating contests so far. I mean, New Hampshire was incredibly high turnout. Nevada was incredibly high turnout. Iowa was incredibly high turnout among young voters, which was something that Bernie Sanders was specifically trying to do. So I kind of challenge that a little bit. Jay Jacobs, the New York State Democratic Party chairman and a superdelegate, echoing many others interviewed, said that the superdelegates should choose a nominee they believed had the best chance of defeating Trump if no candidate wins a majority of delegates during the primaries. Sanders argued that he should become the nominee at the convention with a plurality of delegates to reflect the will of the voters, and that denying him the nomination would enrage his supporters and split the party for years to come. And something that I think that is kind of being undermined here is not only is that going to piss off just his supporters, but it's going to piss off, again, people like my dad, people who are just like have a basic sense for fairness and logic, and people who are not part of the Democratic Party DC establishment bubble. Like, that's just BS to anybody who's looking at it on the face. Like, the person who won the most votes does not get to be the nominee. Like, in a supposedly democratic system and a supposedly democratic party, like, that is insane. Like, that's just, it's going to put people off no matter what way you look at it. Bernie wants to redefine the rules and just say he needs just a plurality, Jacob said. He never really said that, actually. He never said he wanted. Where do we get this whole idea about changing the rule? I'm hearing this again from Jacobs and Elizabeth Warren. Like, what am I going to hear this? There's no been changing the rules, but I think the assumption was that if it had been any other candidate in this situation, maybe Joe Biden ends up getting plurality. He's in a position to get a plurality. What do you think the superdelegates are going to do? Support someone else? No, they're going to support Joe Biden because he's a safe candidate. He's a safe bet in their minds to beat Donald Trump. And I'm starting to get the sense more and more that they're not worried about Bernie Sanders not winning. They're worried about what will happen to them, to their friends, to their sources of income, if Bernie Sanders does win. That is the focus here. If Bernie Sanders does win, that's what's going to be going on. That's what people are worried about. Because there's so many people. Jay Jacobs living a nice life as New York State Democratic Party chairman. All these consultants who have said for time and time again, you can't go left, you can't move left, you just can't do it. Like, all those people who are seeing a massive left-wing movement happen and crapping their pants right now. Like, all these superdelegates out there, the whole idea that they would go against somebody, not Bernie, who ends up winning the most votes, is ridiculous. It's just not. I would be shocked if that were to happen. But it's just their judgment, and they think he can't win based off of their great intuition, their amazing intuition that literally led to the election of Donald Trump. Like, this, like, Hillary's the best. I think Hillary is the best candidate for the job. Like this, I wonder what Jay Jacobs saw of the race in 2016. Like, it's ridiculous. So this article is based off of interviews with 93 superdelegates out of 771 in total, as well as party strategists and aides to senior Democrats about the thinking of party leaders. A vast majority of those superdelegates whose ranks include federal elected officials, former presidents and vice presidents, and the DNC members, predicted no candidate would clinch the nomination during the primaries, and that there would be a brokered convention fight in July to choose a nominee. In a reflection of the establishment's wariness about Sanders, only 9 of the 93 superdelegates interviewed said that Sanders should become the nominee purely based on the basis of arriving at the convention with a plurality if he was short a majority. Again, I really, again, doubt that I have a very, very hard time believing that superdelegates would come in and support someone other than the person with plurality. If that person, for example, was Pete Buttigieg, if he had a plurality of not a majority of delegates coming to the convention, it would be rally behind Pete or else, because the superdelegates would want someone. They would want to pick a nominee to take on Trump. But if the nominee there right in front of them is Bernie, no, that can't be. Can't be. Really an absolute loser, Walter Mondale. I had 60 years of experience with Democratic delegates. I don't think they will do anything like that, said former VP Walter Mondale, who is a superdelegate. They will each do what they want to do, and somehow they'll work it out. God knows how. I don't really know what that means, to be completely honest with you. I mean, they're just quotes galore in this. While there's no widespread public effort underway to undercut Sanders, arresting his rise has emerged as the dominant topic in many Democratic circles. Some are trying to act well before the convention. Since Sanders won Nevada's caucuses on Saturday, 4 donors have approached former Representative Steve Israel to ask if he can suggest someone to run a super PAC and to block